The hall was glowing. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across polished marble floors, and white roses, my late wife's favorite, lined the aisle where my son had just promised his life to another woman. Applause still echoed faintly, mixed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of celebration. Everyone said it was perfect, and maybe it was for them. I stood near the edge of the room, hands folded in front of me, wearing a suit I had bought years ago for occasions I never thought I'd live long enough to attend. My back ached, my knees protested, but none of that mattered. My son was married. My boy, the child I once held in trembling hands, was a man now. I should have been happy, I was, but there was a weight in my chest I couldn't explain. The bride moved through the guests like royalty. She was stunning. No one could deny that elegant dress, flawless makeup, a smile that photographers loved. People whispered about how lucky my son was, how beautiful she looked, how perfect they were together. She smiled at everyone, but when she looked at me, something else flickered behind her eyes, not warmth, not gratitude, calculation. I told myself I was imagining it. Old men imagine things, don't they? We mistake caution for wisdom, suspicion for experience. I tried to brush it away. After all, today was about love. She approached me just before the reception began, champagne glass in hand. Cameras flashed as she leaned in for a hug, her perfume sharp and sweet at the same time. I felt her arms wrap around me, lightly, carefully, as though touching something fragile or disposable. Her lips came close to my ear. Her voice dropped, smooth and quiet, hidden beneath the music. "Old man," she whispered, smiling for the cameras, "you're going to buy us a house, or I'm leaving him." For a moment the world stopped, the laughter blurred, the music faded, even the light seemed dim. I didn't turn, I didn't pull away. I didn't ask her to repeat herself, because I had heard every word clearly. The entitlement, the threat, the complete absence of love. This wasn't a request. It was a demand. My heart sank not because of the money, but because of what it meant. Because, in that single sentence, I saw my son's future hanging from a price tag. I saw years of my sacrifice reduced to a down payment. I saw love replaced with leverage. She believed I was weak. She believed age had softened me into obedience. She believed I would pay, quietly, desperately, just to keep my son from heartbreak. I felt her smile widen slightly, confident, victorious. I nodded just once, slowly, silently. Her grip loosened. She pulled back, satisfied, already celebrating a house she hadn't earned. To her, this was settled business. She turned away, heels clicking against the floor, laughter spilling effortlessly from her lips. No one noticed anything wrong. No one noticed the knife still lodged in my chest. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my son across the room. He was laughing with his friends, unaware that his marriage had just been held hostage. He looked so happy, so trusting, and I knew then absolutely, painfully, that if I stayed silent I would fail him. The MC tapped the microphone, calling for attention. "Now," he said cheerfully, "we'd like to invite the groom's father to say a few words." Applause broke out. Someone placed the microphone in my hand. I felt its weight, cold, solid, honest. The bride glanced at me from across the room, lifting her glass with a playful smile, as if to remind me of our little secret. She thought this was over. She thought she had won. I took a breath. And for the first time that night, I smiled not the tired smile of an old man, but the calm smile of someone who had made a decision. The room quieted, and I stepped forward. As I stood there holding the microphone, the faces in front of me blurred into a single, shifting crowd. Applause faded into a dull echo, and for a brief moment, I wasn't in a wedding hall anymore. I was standing in a dim hospital corridor 2 years earlier, holding a newborn wrapped in a thin blue blanket, while a doctor spoke words that split my life in two. "I'm sorry, we did everything we could. Asterisk, my wife never got to see our son open his eyes. I learned that day how loud silence could be. There was no time to grieve properly. Grief doesn't wait when a child is hungry. I became a father and a widower in the same breath. I went home to a house that still smelled like her, and I learned how to cook meals for two hands when my heart could barely function as one. I worked wherever there was work. Construction sites in the summer, night shifts in warehouses, cleaning offices long after people had gone home. My hands grew rough, my back bent early. Dreams, personal ones, quietly died without ceremony. Every choice I made had a single question behind it. Asterisk, will this help my son? Asterisk, when he was sick, I missed work. When he needed books, I skipped meals. When he wanted to go on school trips, I lied about overtime and borrowed money I couldn't afford to repay quickly. I wore the same coat for 10 winters so he could have a new one each year. I never told him. Children don't need to carry their parents' burdens. They need shoulders to stand on. He grew up kind, too kind, perhaps. He trusted easily, loved deeply, and believed people were mostly good because I wanted him to believe that. I wanted him to have a softer world than the one I lived in. I thought I had succeeded. Then she entered his life. At first, I said nothing. She was ambitious, yes, but ambition isn't a crime. She liked nice things. Who doesn't? But there were moments that sat uneasily in my chest, the way she looked around my modest home, calculating its worth instead of its warmth. The way she corrected my son in public, laughed when he brushed it off, the way she spoke about standards and expectations, as if love were a contract with penalties. Once she asked me, half joking, half testing, what I planned to leave my son someday. I remember smiling politely and saying, everything that matters. She didn't smile back. I paid for the wedding without complaint. Every flower, every plate, every shining detail that impressed the guests. I told myself it was my final duty, my last big gift. I believed that once they were married, my role would be quiet support from the background. But standing there now, microphone trembling slightly in my hand, I understood something painful and clear. She had never seen any of this. She hadn't seen the nights I slept in my car because rent had gone up, and I refused to uproot my son from his school. She hadn't seen the hospital bills folded neatly into drawers, paid slowly over years. She hadn't seen the loneliness, the birthdays spent alone, the sacrifices made without witnesses. To her, I was just an old man with money to extract, and that was the deepest betrayal of all. I looked at my son again. His eyes met mine, warm and trusting, filled with pride. He had no idea his marriage was standing on a threat whispered in secret. My throat tightened. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was disappointed. Disappointed that someone could stand at the altar, speak vows about love and loyalty, and minutes later reduce that promise to a real estate demand. The room waited. The bride shifted slightly in her seat, still smiling, still confident. She believed my silence was surrender. She was wrong. I cleared my throat, steadying my voice. My friends, I began. Before I say anything else, there's something you should know about love. The bride's smile flickered just for a second, and in that tiny crack, the truth was already beginning to surface. My friends, I said again, my voice echoing gently through the hall, thank you for being here to celebrate my son and what we all hope is the beginning of a beautiful life. A few guests nodded, smiling. Glasses were raised. The bride relaxed into her chair, crossing her legs elegantly, her confidence fully restored. To her, this was just a sentimental speech from an old man who knew his place. I let the silence stretch. Love, I continued, isn't loud, it isn't flashy, and it isn't something you can buy. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. I turned slightly toward my son. I raised this boy to believe that love is built on patience, respect, and honesty, that when two people stand together, they face the world as equals, not as debtor and collector. The bride's fingers tightened around her glass. I took a breath. My hands were steady now. The fear I expected never came, only clarity. "Just a few minutes ago," I said calmly, "someone leaned close to me and whispered something they thought would never be heard." The room grew still. The music stopped. Even the servers paused mid-step. I turned fully toward the bride. They said, "Old man, you're going to buy us a house or I'm leaving him." The words landed like shattered glass. Gasps erupted from the tables. A chair scraped loudly as someone shifted. The bride's face drained of color so fast it was almost frightening. "That's not true," she said quickly, laughing too loudly. "He's joking. This is some kind of speech, right? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I simply looked at her." "I wish it were a joke," I replied, "because jokes are harmless, ultimatums are not." My son stood up. "What?" he whispered, confusion and pain colliding on his face. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I turned back to him, my voice softening. "I'm sorry you're hearing this way, but you deserve the truth, especially today." The bride shook her head, eyes darting around the room. "He misunderstood. I would never say something like that. He's old. He probably misheard." A few uncomfortable murmurs followed. But then, quietly, someone spoke from the side. I was near them. An aunt said hesitantly, "I didn't hear every word, but I did hear house and leaving." Another voice joined in. "She's been saying things like that all week." Someone else added, "about not living in anything small." The bride stood abruptly. "This is insane," she snapped. "You're all ruining my wedding." "No," I said gently. "You did that the moment you tried to turn love into a purchase." I let that sink in before continuing. "For the record," I said, "I do own property. I worked my entire life for it. Every brick, every wall built with sacrifice, and I was prepared to help my son because that's what fathers do." Her eyes lit up for a split second, but, I continued, "nothing I own will ever be handed over as a ransom to keep a marriage alive." Silence crashed down again. My son looked at his bride as if seeing her for the first time. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Did you really say that?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I just wanted security," she said finally. "Is that so wrong? Security," I replied, "doesn't come from threats. It comes from trust." Tears welled in my son's eyes, not loud, dramatic tears, but the quiet kind that come when something precious breaks. The bride's composure shattered. "Fine," she shouted. "If this is how I'm treated, I don't need any of you." She threw her napkin onto the table and stormed toward the exit, heels echoing sharply against the marble floor. The doors slammed behind her. No one followed. I lowered the microphone slowly. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," I said softly. "I came here to protect my son." The room remained silent, not out of shock now, but out of understanding. And in that silence, the power she thought she had vanished completely. The hall didn't erupt into chaos the way move is make you expect. There was no shouting, no dramatic chase after the bride, no hurried excuses from the guests. Instead, there was something heavier, an uncomfortable, sobering stillness. My son sat down slowly, as if his legs had forgotten how to hold him. I walked to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. He didn't look up right away. His chest rose and fell unevenly, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him all at once. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely louder than a breath. "I should have seen it. I should have listened to you." "There's nothing to be sorry for," I replied. "You loved honestly. That's never a mistake." We left the hall early. Some guests quietly hugged us. Others avoided our eyes, unsure of what to say. By the time we stepped outside, the night air felt colder, but cleaner. As if something poisonous had finally been drained from our lives. Days passed. The wedding decorations were returned. The calls slowed. The gossip faded. What remained was truth. The marriage was never legally finalized. The paperwork, like the relationship itself, had collapsed before it could take root. The bride sent messages, at first angry ones, then pleading ones, then none at all. When money was taken off the table, so was her interest. My son grieved, not just for her, but for the future he thought he had. I sat with him through long nights, just like I did when he was a child afraid of the dark. This time the monsters were real, but so was the healing. One evening he looked at me and said, "You saved me." I shook my head. "No, you saved yourself the moment you chose to see the truth." Life moved forward quietly. I updated my will, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Everything I owned would go into a trust, released only for purposes that built a life, not bought control. Education, health, stability, love, the things that endure. Months later, my son moved into a small apartment. It wasn't grand, it wasn't impressive, but it was peaceful. He filled it with laughter, books, and friends who valued him, not his future assets. As for me, I returned to my routines, morning walks, a modest garden, evenings with memories that no longer felt heavy. For the first time in years, I felt something close to pride, not in what I had endured, but in what I had protected. The bride disappeared from our lives completely, and that was the sweetest revenge of all, not humiliation, not punishment, but the quiet certainty that love cannot be bought, threatened, or extorted, and that standing up for the truth, even in silence, can change a life forever. I sometimes think back to that moment she whispered in my ear, so sure of her power. She never realized that the old man she tried to corner had already survived loss, hardship, and loneliness, and that a man who has nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of all, because he will always choose dignity over fear.